Welcome to the Intentional Man Podcast, a podcast that inspires and equips men to lead lives of intentionality and grow to their full potential. I'm your host, Jonathan McGinley, a life coach that helps men just like you create the life that you want and live a story of significance through my coaching and tools on intentionality. Thanks for joining, and welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the show. I am excited to be here with you today and excited to have a great guest, Jon Holsten, on the show today. Jon, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, for giving up some of your time to be with us. Jon, I'm just excited to have you because he has had a very successful career in law enforcement for over 17 years and then made a successful career change into real estate in about 2013. And then since then, he's been a nationally recognized high volume producer. That first year, he was a top producing rookie of the year in the city of Fort Collins by the Board of Realtors there. And then what's really exciting now is Jon has launched an online coaching program for real estate agents and is just passionate about helping others make a successful career change into real estate like he did. So really excited to have you, Jon. And just know you're going to bring a lot of value to us today. And I'm excited to just pick your brain. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I kind of want to dive right into this thing and just give people value right at the start. So this is the Intentional Man Podcast. We talk about being intentional as men. So when it comes to your career, because you've had kind of two very different careers and made a shift, and we're going to get into that. But when it comes to being intentional with your career, what just comes to mind for you off the bat when you hear that word?
Yeah, that's great. And actually, this is my third career. So I started off as a TV reporter. Yeah, and then I went to law enforcement, and then I went to real estate. So I've had a chance to jump around just a little bit. But man, what does intentional mean in your career? I think the word purpose is a big one. Doing everything you do on purpose, right? And then the other piece of it is just being super deliberate. So purpose and deliberation, those are the two things that I think are super important to our careers and in making changes and just day in to day out. I'd like, Jonathan, to take just a second, because when it comes to being deliberate and on purpose, I'm going to pull from my law enforcement career just a little bit. When you are dealing with a murder suspect, sorry, this is taking a weird turn already for you, isn't it? If you're dealing with a murder suspect, if somebody kills another person with the intent to kill them, it's first-degree murder, okay? If somebody kills somebody in the heat of passion, not really intending to do it, but they do it in the middle of something crazy, second-degree murder. If somebody is reckless and they kill somebody, it's reckless manslaughter, right? So this sounds a little weird, but my goal has always been to be first degree career building, right? So first degree life, that I live my life with intent, to be intentional. And so kind of a weird parallel, but that's one way I kind of look at it.
Yeah. And I love that. Purpose and deliberation. So walk me through those two things. So for you, what does it mean to have purpose in your career? What does that look like?
Well, I think the big thing is to know your why. Simon Sinek has that great book, Start With Why. And knowing your why is critical to having purpose and to walk out your life and your career, knowing where you want to head, knowing what is important to you. Why do you do what you do? Why is it that you're on the path that you are? And so that's what purpose is to me, is just very closely tied to your why.
Absolutely. Yeah, which is super important. And I think we think about those things a lot when we first get into a career, but sometimes it's harder to think about those things when you're in the middle of it, right? Like once you get going, it's harder to remind yourself of the why. So have you found that, or like a good practice or something that's helped you to just stay connected to the why, stay connected to your purpose in your career as you progress?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the one thing people need to be able to do is give themselves permission for their why to change over time. Okay. Because a lot of people feel like, I've got my why, I'm going to charge through with this. Well, our whys change depending on where we're at in life, depending on what's going on. So as our why changes, and it may not for some people, but for me it has, if your why changes, give yourself permission to change directions. And then your why should be motivating for you, right? So that when things happen in your life, in your work, in your entrepreneurship, that you can always go back to that why at that particular moment to remotivate yourself.
Yeah.
For instance, if someone has their why is money, strictly money, and they're in a business where money doesn't come all the time, what's going to happen with that person? They're going to become demotivated, and they're going to want to bail on what they're doing. But if your why is set in something higher, and we all have to make money in our business, but I'm just saying if that's the number one thing, you could become discouraged. But just understanding that whatever your why is today, go back and remind yourself. I like to have a weekly planning session.
Yeah.
That weekly planning session, I focus on my why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And what do I do this week to hit that target? And what specific steps do I take? By what day do I want to have something done? Just to stay intentional in that way, but remind yourself of your why for that particular day or that stage in life.
That's great. And yeah, it sounds like on your Sunday planning or weekly planning, whenever that is, that you're hitting those two things, purpose and deliberation, that you are reminding yourself of why you're doing it, the purpose of it, and then you're planning specifically what I need to do. So I think that's awesome that you have that practice that kind of makes sure that you do those two pieces. And I know we'll get into more kind of practicals throughout your story and some of your why and stuff. So I want to kind of dive into that because I think it's an amazing story and would love to just kind of hear the process for you. So take us back. So you've got this career in law enforcement for over 17 years. Talk about that moment near the end there where you felt like you needed a shift. What were some of the elements? Why did you feel like it was time to change careers?
Loaded question, Jonathan, because there's so many pieces. There's so many pieces to that puzzle. I will tell you that, going on 20 years of dealing with garbage is hard. No one ever calls the police when things are going great, right? Yeah. So, just my career path was on patrol for, about 10 of my 17 years. I was in investigations for about 3. I was a supervisor for a number of those years. When I was a detective, I focused primarily on child sex crimes and homicides. Then I dealt with internal affairs. I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, a fatal shooting. Just a lot of junk. And I think I came to a point where I was like, man, I'm tapped. In fact, I came, at one point in my career, 2 times actually, I dealt with severe depression and anxiety. And it was pretty connected to vicarious trauma and dealing with stuff in law enforcement. And I got to a point where I was like, I just don't really want to keep doing this. Paired with that, and I am a man of faith, and there was a lot of prayer behind it, trying to figure out what do I do here. I had a desire to control my schedule more. Joke was on me on that one as I jumped into my new real estate business. But I wanted to control my schedule more. I wanted to build something for my family that I could do with my family. That's also not been as easy as I was hoping it would be. And I wanted to build my financial future, that I wasn't, that I could have some residual income or what have you and not be reliant. The day I left the police department, I knew was the day that I was done drawing a check there. And, when you work for a check every 2 weeks, you're changing you're exchanging, time for dollars. Mm-hmm. And we do that anyway with whatever you do, but it's at a different level there. So I think I had a number of things going through my head. I had just the junk I was dealing with. I had, there was one, I remember very clearly one night, it was about 4:00 in the morning. I was filling my my police car with gas, and we had an alert tone go off. And alert tones mean listen up because something major is being dispatched. And we had an alert tone go off. I was a sergeant, and the dispatcher said that a baby had been stabbed. And so when that happened, I immediately was like, I didn't want to go. I was like, these are the things that harm you for the rest of your life, potentially. And I honestly, at that point, I was like, I am dodging a bullet all the time, and then right then they updated and said it was a lady stabbed, not a baby. I'd never been so happy to hear the lady was stabbed. That was, not a good thing. But I'm just saying it was repeatedly stuff like that. So I felt like I was dodging bullets all the time. And so just those things, bad stuff, kind of getting tired of where I was. I actually loved my law enforcement job for the most part and really enjoyed going to work most days. But it was just a culmination of things where I was like, it's just time to look elsewhere.
For sure. Yeah. It sounds like, there's a lot of just kind of mental and emotional aspects there of a little bit of burnout or just, feeling just beat down by that constant wear. And I think, there's times where we're in careers where we feel that, but you had been there for 17 years. I'm assuming you had kind of worked your way up a little bit. You had put in a lot of time. So how did you decide that you actually would really take the plunge? Because I think a lot of us feel that tension of like, I know I need to get out of here, but this is secure. It's something I know. It's something I've worked for. It's something I put a lot of time into. What was finally kind of that tipping point or whatever for you to just say, this is going to be worth it, whatever it looks like?
I started developing a real vision for having something of my own that I could build. But I didn't know what it was. I wanted to do something on my own and build a business. Real estate, Jonathan, never crossed my mind. I actually initially wasn't thinking that. But then I started asking around, and I think this is an important thing to do. I started asking people. I said, hey, you know me, my friends, what do you think? What do you think I'd be good at? Like, what do you think I could, if I wasn't in police work, is there anything that comes to mind that you think I might be able to do well? And I had a few people say, I think real estate. I think you'd actually really maybe enjoy that. It's very relational based, and I think that might be something you'd like. And I was like, I hadn't really thought of that. But then I started thinking more about it, and here's the tipping point. So what I did in Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, it talks about how the importance of counsel. Getting counsel, and with counsel, there's victory, and success. So I developed I built what I called my council of 12, and they were 12 friends. Some who I knew would probably not support me in a change. Some I felt would. Some I just had no idea. So I wanted to get a cross section of different people, and I met with them individually. And I gave, I showed them my business plan specific to real estate, which was, I think, on a Big Chief notepad or something like that. It was nothing special. Yeah. And I went through it, and I talked to them. My wife was one of them, of course, and then just various friends. I sat down with each one of them individually over several months. And after that, and I shared my vision and what I hoped to do and why I felt I could do it and the financial side of things. And I had 10 people say, I really think you should do this. I think you're going to regret it if you don't. Wow. I had one say, I don't know. This is risky. You got a great job. You've worked your way up. You're in a good place. And I had one say, absolutely not. You will regret this for the rest of your life. So I went with the 10, and I felt like, maybe I've kind of have, a consensus among most people. And the guy who said absolutely not at this point has come back and said, I was wrong, because it's worked out pretty well for you, So I had that counsel, and I worked with them, and I kind of felt like, okay, now I can take this jump and feel confident. And you know what? I was like, if it doesn't work, I'll figure something out. Mm-hmm. I can be industrious enough to figure something out. But I was in a place where it was single income. We had 6 kids at home. I never did a day of real estate and police work on the same day. I jumped, cashed in some retirement to live.
Okay.
For a while, and just made it happen. And thankfully, it took
Wow.
off pretty quick. And but that was, that's what pushed me over, was just the desire to, we never want to run from something. We want to run to something,
To something.
right? So I wasn't running from law enforcement, but I was running to something that I could do individually for build my own business and really have a lot of say in success.
That's great. And I think I heard, two kind of main pieces there, which kind of really, because I always was curious of how you were so successful quickly. And we'll get into some of those obstacles and everything, but that shows me just kind of the thought, the time, the intentionality that you put in to prepare yourself to make the jump. And I heard two things: was that you gained clarity on the vision, the kind of life that you wanted. The purpose of your career, you took time to gain that. And it even wasn't necessarily that real estate was the first piece of that. It was you got a vision that was beyond that of, this is what I want my life to look like, and this is what the kind of life I want to build, and I want to have time with my family and be more flexible. So you gained a lot of clarity on that vision. And then you surrounded yourself with great men. And I think that's incredibly wise, to actually have men to speak into your life in those kind of situations. So gaining vision, gaining clarity, gathering men around. And then you also put together a plan to present to those guys of, hey, this is what it could actually look like. So, because sometimes it feels super scary to jump like that. And it is, it's a big one.
It's very scary. Especially if you're coming from a place of being in a good place, right?
Yeah.
You have a solid job. You're not in a bad place. You just want to get to a different place.
For sure. Yep. So, yeah. And I think you just put in the time and the effort and the people around you in order to kind of help smooth that transition. So, when you actually kind of did make the jump, and you even mentioned this earlier, you didn't quite have the flexibility you wanted. You didn't, there were some things that didn't pan out exactly the way. What were some of the main challenges of transitioning, of like actually making the successful transition?
I think the number one challenge for me was my identity. And I had it, when I went from being a TV reporter to police, I went from kind of being someone that, you couldn't really go anywhere without being recognized. You kind of were looked up to for what you did. It was kind of a cool job. And I went to law enforcement, and I was one of 300 officers in our city, and kind of blend in, with more people. And then I went from 300 officers where, it's kind of funny, when you're in uniform, and it's a different culture today. So you might get yelled at and have stuff thrown at you now. But when I was there, you kind of a rock star. You walk into places, people want to talk to you. They thank you. They want to talk, want to talk about work and appreciate. And it was great. And then I went from that to one of 1,200 realtors in our city. So, there was this place where I was kind of walking through. So identity was a big thing for me. And it was sad. I mean, there was some mourning involved of what I had built in my previous career, but there was excitement for what was coming. So identity was number one, I would say. Number two was the financial side of things, because financially I had a check coming in every 2 weeks. I was getting paid well, and jumping into real estate, it's very different. We went a few months with nothing, and thankfully we had some savings to live on, or retirement that I cashed in. And then, so that was a big one. And then learning just as time went, learning how to anticipate money coming in and not, and kind of living on that. So that was a transition. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think working on my own, right? I showed up every day, police department, and then now I was in total control of my schedule, and that was just learning how to do that. It was a good thing, but that was a transition. And then finally, I do think balance is a hard one because, again, I kind of had set hours at the police department, and then I got out of it, and I could work as much as I wanted, and I had to, right? I mean, I was building a business. The flexibility piece, that's where I was saying it came into flexibility, and balance was hard for me early on, and still can be. I mean, I certainly don't have all the answers on that. So, so identity, finances, balance, and flexibility.
Those are all, and of course, those are, main challenges that a lot of people face, especially in a career change. I'd love to kind of zero in on this identity piece because I think this applies to everyone, whether you're looking to make a change or not. How have you found in your life, like the times where your career has become your identity and the times where your identity has been found in something else? Tell me kind of how you found the balance there of making sure your identity isn't totally wrapped up in your work.
Yeah. Well, in my coaching, what I encourage people to think through on that is that your identity is intact as a man, right? I mean, you are who you are, deep at the core of who you are. So I refer to it as the new do, not the new you, right? Yeah. So there's something new that you're doing, but the you is still there. And so understanding that, so there's identity wrapped up in that, but I mean, clearly you see yourself as somebody, others see yourself as an investigator or see you as an investigator, others, but here's where we're right here. So I think always coming back, and for me, again, I have a spiritual foundation where I go, that's where my identity is. That's where I want the true man to be, who has the same values and the same intentionality to walk with God, and that's where I want to be. So I think trying to shut out the noise in our own mind, right? Because we tell ourselves a lot of stories, and so we try to bump up in our mind who we are, but really we can bump it up really high, and our true identity is even higher than that when we are secure in our foundation. So I think just understanding that, hey, my identity is wrapped up a lot in emotion, and emotion is not always accurate. Mm-hmm. And so I think coming back when I would feel that way, come back to what's truly important in my life with my family, raising my kids, leading my family, which, we men struggle with that stuff. I still do, but it's just a matter of coming back and reminding myself of who I really am and not being so self-enamored by what I could have been or should have been or was, because it's fleeting. Those things are fleeting, but the foundation of who we are is not. So I think it's just coming back to that consistently.
That's great, because I mean, this is such a temptation. I think as men, we're always kind of searching for that validation, that we're doing things well, that we're being successful, that we matter, that we're important. And I think this is one of the biggest areas that we look for it, right, is our career. And you mentioned it earlier, if you tie everything up in your career and money, and then all of a sudden it's not there, then you don't have anything else to fall on. And so I think this is a big one, and it takes time, it takes thought, it takes reflection, it takes intentionality to actually think about what that could possibly be. Because if you don't really think about it and gain clarity on who you are, who you want to be, where you want to find in your identity, naturally we're probably going to end up finding it in our career, because it's just the most tangible thing that's in front of us all the time. So I asked you this question earlier about just finding fulfillment in a career. So can you kind of compare and contrast the times where your identity has been in your work and how that, were you feeling fulfilled in that area, or when your identity was locked in on some of those other things that were important to you, like your family and God and those things? Have you had seasons in life where you've put your identity in your career, and what did that look like? And then did you have seasons in life where you put your identity in those things, and how did that look like?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, I think any of us who are successful in our careers and who have a business that does well, our identity can get very wrapped up in that piece if we're not careful, because there's a lot of affirmation, there's accolades, there's things that as a man, we want to feel validated in what we're doing, like you said. So when the world validates you for what you're doing, then you become very stuck in that, and you want that's something that you hunger for, is that affirmation. And so easy to go to that place. But what I have found is, even when you're receiving praise for certain things, there's still not still not a full deep satisfaction there. Sometimes there's something still missing for me, because I know that I do have the foundational things that are really way more important. Here they are. Here it struggles sometimes to make it more important for me, right? But just understanding that I do have that foundation that in the end is more important for me. And you hear people say it. It's like, okay, when you die, or when you're nearing your deathbed, are you going to wish you spent more time at work or with your family? And I know the answer to that question. Yeah. I'd rather be more engaged in relationship with my family and my friends. And so I know that it's just moving that from your head to your heart is a really hard one. But I think just, again, trying to consistently remind yourself of that. So I have felt fulfilled on one hand in my business because it has, been successful, but there's something missing there. And then there are other times, like right now is a great time in life, as far as my kids are launching out of the house. I've got 4 of the 6 as of this recording that have moved on. They're, 3 are out of college. One's built a business that they're actually all pretty entrepreneur minded in a lot of ways. So I'm watching their success, and that's fun. And I can engage with them in meaningful ways also. Mm-hmm. But I see myself making sure that I don't want them to get too saturated in their career and identity where they're doing things, making mistakes that I made. Right. Yeah. So, but I've been I think that identity and satisfaction in my family life has also been good, but it's not, Jonathan, I still struggle like my police, this is a little bit of a bunny trail, but with my police work, I had to numb myself to so much emotionally, right? Mm-hmm. Like I couldn't connect. I had the coping mechanisms where if I was dealing with a fatal car accident situation, where I'm dealing with a child victim or a homicide victim's family, different things like that, I had to numb myself to that because you just can't let your head go there a lot of times. It's a coping mechanism, nothing wrong with that, but you can't walk through your door at home and it's just gone, right? So then you're having a hard time connecting with your family because that's how your brain's working now.
Yeah.
I still struggle with that to some degree. So I'm even 10 years later out of my career, that's still an area of growth for me, is connecting at home like I need to. And some of that's just because we guys sometimes have an issue on the emotional side of things, really connecting with our families instead of our career. So I get kind of a double whammy there that I try to work through. So I can be very satisfied at home and feel successful and be very, I don't know that I'm ever content in my family because I always feel like there's more I should be doing there. Mm-hmm. But I can be very satisfied there, and that's great. And then on the business side, melding those two together in the balance we've talked about can be challenging. But it's always going back to the foundational truths of where you see your success and where you see yourself as a man.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that's the key element. And it sounds like that's what you found, is making sure you know that. And you touched on that earlier. You got to know your why, and you have to have a why that's deeper than just your career, just making money, and then find the balance of how to pursue the two, because sometimes there's a temptation, if that why, like to be very passive at work or to not pursue big things. Like I think there can be this tough balance sometimes of pursuing only work and you're putting your identity there and pursuing money and all that, and then you leave your family and other things that are important behind, or you kind of just say, oh, my identity's not in work, and so it doesn't really matter how successful I am there. So how do you find that balance of like driving, being successful, doing well in business, making sure you're doing the best that you possibly can in that, but not keeping your whole identity in there, and making sure that you're successful at home? Like, have you found that balance? Have you struggled with that at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know many men who don't struggle with that issue. Mm-hmm. For me, what's helpful are my wife and kids are great reminders, right? My wife will verbally remind me that I'm getting too focused on certain things, which is really helpful. And my My kids, it's more of they don't necessarily say a lot. They do sometimes if I'm in a situation where we've got a family event or something and I get a call, I'm so quick to take those calls sometimes. Work-related calls when I need to just kind of let those be for a bit, because my customer service, I want to be really, really on top of that, because that's one of the benchmarks of my business is I want to be known for world-class service. There's nothing wrong with that. But when I let it go into my family and it interferes with those things that are really important, that's a problem. So they will remind me of that. They'll look at me in a way that I know, I have those reminders that will help me keep coming back to where I need to be.
Yeah.
And then I just have this emotional burden, a mental burden that I know I need to be doing more on the other side. But it doesn't do any good to know it. You've got to act on it, right? That's the thing is, again, you have to be intentional, deliberate. Yes. And I think that's everything from dates with your wife to connecting with your kids, checking on them, texting them, just staying involved in a really positive way. So I have to force myself to do that sometimes. And some guys don't have to do that. They may have this natural tendency just to stay really engaged at home. It's work for me. I have to keep doing that. So I wish I could come in here and, on the Intentional Man podcast and say that I'm intentional all the time. And I'm not. I mean, this is a struggle, and I think we're all in it together. So I do think, and I've got some other friends, some other men in my life that will say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you thinking about this?
Yeah.
Are you paying attention to that struggle you have? And I think that's just the importance of being surrounded by other men that push you in the right direction.
For sure. Well, and I love that you just brought that up, that it's a continuous growth journey. And it would be dumb for us to sit up here and say that we got this thing figured out and that we're the most intentional people. But I love what you said of like, it truly is work. Like, but that's what the intentional part is knowing what's important to you and having that clear vision, and then being willing to set aside time to think about how you're going to pursue that on a daily basis or a weekly basis. You talked about your weekly planning, but for me, that's the same thing. It's like, if I don't actually have that time in the week or in the morning to think about the kind of person I want to be, to think about how I want to show up, to think about how I want to encourage people, when I don't have that, I typically am not very intentional. I'm like, that's just natural for I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in just what's going on in our careers and the day-to-day and the work. And so I think that's the key that we've both been talking about today is, are you taking the time to make sure that you know what's important in your career, what's important in your life, and you're constantly reminding yourself to pursue those things and to live out those things. And it is work and it does take time, but ultimately, if you want to be who you want to be, then you do have to put in a little time on it. And that's the big thing we talk about all the time is you can't go through life reacting to everything that's happening and being passive and just letting it happen and expect to kind of be the person that you really, really want to be. You have to know it, and then you have to take time to really pursue it. And so I love that you said that. I love that you said that you're not perfect in it. I'm not perfect in it. And it really is work, but it's work that is worth it.
If everyone was great at being intentional, you'd have no need for this podcast. And this podcast is super needed and helpful, right? Because this is how we, as men, can connect and realize, man, what, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that, maybe this is helpful, maybe that would be helpful. And so this is great.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks for sharing all that. That was really good stuff in there. So I think some of the key elements from Jon's story is finding your why, finding your purpose, being deliberate, having those constant reminders. And then you mentioned 2 separate times having a group of men when it was making the big jump, having counsel, but then also just now having guys who can call you out and kind of help you see things that you may not see. So a lot of good things there. I'd love to just hear specifically in this transition, because I've just wanted to know, when you get into this and you get into real estate and it's a lot more work than you think it is, all of a sudden you have to manage yourself, you have to manage your schedule. What were some of the practices? What were some of the habits that you put in on a consistent daily basis to build a successful real estate career?
Yeah. So I'm gonna quiz you here for a second. Okay. You mind
All
if I
right.
turn the table on you?
All right, let's do it.
So out of 10 realtors, 10 people who get into real estate, how many of those, well, how many of the 10 are going to be around in 5 years doing the business?
Yeah, I know it's really low. I'd say just one or two, probably.
Yeah. Basically 87% flunk out. So one to two are going to be around after 5 years. So only 13% success rate in this business after 5 years. So why? What can you do? What is it that the mindset you need to have? What specifically do you have to do? And I say before it's what you do, it's what you have in place, like specific things that I call them the 5 pillars of success in real estate. And this isn't just real estate. This is pretty much any business that you start. But since I coach real estate, this is what we talk about. Number one, this is going to be surprising. You got to know your why, right? Your why must be in place. Number two, you've got to have money to build your business. I tell people you need 6 months of living expenses. That's everything from your house payment to your gas, to food, to entertainment, whatever you're going to spend money on that you can't live without. And that what you can and can't live without is going to be different for different people, right? But you got to have 6 months of that set aside. And then I say another $3,000 to $5,000 to launch your business right with advertising, business cards, website, Photoshop, photos, whatever, just to get things in place. And if you don't have that money, that's a hard thing. Number three is to have an existing sphere of influence. So I had a sphere of influence from being in the city for 30 years. And I had to learn how to work that sphere of influence, right? But I had to have an existing sphere, not knocking on doors and calling. Nothing wrong with that. But for me, I felt that I had some people in place I could work with. Number four was to end up in the right situation, the right brokerage, real estate brokerage. Number five was to be teachable, to remain teachable. So those are the 5 pillars that I call, and you can take away a pillar and you're probably okay. You take away 2, it's getting a little more difficult. You take away 3 and now it may be wiser to stop and take, a timing thing, maybe more what it is. So I had those, I think, 5 things in place. And by the way, my why is not because I enjoy real estate. And my why is not because, you can be successful in it or make good money. My why is people. I love relationship. And so money will come and go. Real estate deals will come and go. People aren't going anywhere. And so if I can focus on that, that's big for me. So I had my why. I was able to cash in some retirement for savings. It's the only way I had that. I didn't have savings otherwise enough to do that. I had an existing sphere of influence. I ended up in the right brokerage. I did my research and I went into the right real estate brokerage to get started that provided good mentoring, guidance, resources, all that. And in 5, I just remained teachable. And then I just started really working all of that, right? Using that to advantage. And so from the very get-go, I just was on the phone with people. And by the way, I'm not a sales guy. I don't sell anything. I'm a guide. I want to be known as Jon, who happens to be a realtor, not that realtor Jon. That's how I want to be known. And so I did a lot of calls and texts and handwritten notes, nothing to do with business, because I was already like that. I wanted to connect with people before I got into real estate. So it's a big deal. I'll take people to coffee and lunch and we don't even talk about real estate, but they know I'm here if they need something, So I just established myself and I had to rebrand myself from being, a police officer to being in real estate. That was not easy.
Yeah.
But I did do that. I was able to do that. One of the first things I did was bought a bus bench right outside the police department, so that every time everyone who went in and out of the police gates into the back parking lot had to go by me, their former sergeant, who's now a real estate agent. So that's one way I kind of started rebranding to them. But
there you go. Yeah.
So those were some of the specific things I really went in place. And then from there, it's using those things that were in place to the advantage. So anytime someone fails in real estate, they don't make it. That's just part of their story. It's just something to learn from. But when people don't make it, you can typically trace it back to 1, 2, 3, all of those pillars that were, not hit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, a lot of people have that vision of being able to work for themselves and having the flexible schedule and all that. What are some of the pros and cons of that? And how did you really learn to manage you and your time? Because once it was just you, you weren't under the police force anymore. It was just you out there. So how did you really learn that?
I've always tried to have, and think I have had a good work ethic. I'm going to show up. I didn't try to cut corners at work and police work, and I didn't try to get out early and not have to tell people and be lazy and work. And that's not kind of in my DNA. I don't want to be like that. So, I spent my 17 years in my years before that in journalism, showing up. I showed up on time. I worked hard. Applied myself, wanted to do the very best work I could do. And some of that comes back to people pleasing, which isn't always a good thing, but I'm a people pleaser at heart. Yeah. So I wanted to please my supervisors and please people around me. I've balanced out. That's not the most important thing for me now, but all that to say, there was some limbic stuff going on there where I would just automatically responded to certain things that way. When I went into real estate, I didn't lose that work ethic, right? Like I wanted to still stay on top of things. So I still went to the office. I mean, you don't have to go to an office at all. When you're in real estate, you work for yourself. You fly the flag of a company. Company doesn't hire you. You don't work for a company as a real estate agent. Typically, there's some places that will do it that way, but you're typically a contractor. You're on your own. No one's telling you when to be there and what to do. But I still showed up at 8 o'clock. I went home at 6, or I worked late into the night. I just still worked hard, and you've got to do that. So I had that thankfully naturally ingrained that I didn't just slack, because what happens if you slack and you don't do your work, 3 to 6 months from now, you're going to feel that. Like you're going to really feel that. And you learn that. You do that a couple of times, and then, you don't want to do that again. So you will, when you're in business for yourself, you will feel the consequences of your actions. Now, the flip side of that is true in a really good way. You work hard, do the things you're supposed to do, then that's also can be very, very successful, right? But for me, I just kept the work ethic. I showed up to work. I had to make it work. I had 6 kids at home.
Yeah.
I did not have savings really. Single income. If it didn't work, I was in trouble. I was going to have to do something else. So I had to drive. I was hungry. And, you'll find people who are retired and they've got a great pension coming in and they want to go into real estate. And some of them, I guess, do okay, but a lot of them, they're not hungry. They don't have to succeed. And when it gets hard, that can go away. So that was a big one for me. And going into my brokerage and how, I tell people in real estate and in most businesses, you don't have to recreate the wheel. There's very, very successful people in this business. Just follow what they did. Just copy them and go down that road. And we all have different spokes, right? Like you don't have to recreate the wheel, but we have different spokes in how we do things or how we are. And you put your spin on some different things, but just follow examples. And I went in and said, what are the most successful? I walked into the marketing department. I said, what do the most successful agents around here do? And they said, they do this, that, and that. I'm like, sign me up. Let's just do it. I'll find the money to pay for that marketing. And I did. And that's what I think got us off to a great start too. Because people know an average of 10.2 realtors. 10 realtors on average. What is the number one reason they go with a particular one? Well, do they know and like and trust them? Sure. But the number one reason people go with a particular agent is the last person they heard from.
Oh, wow.
The last person they heard from. So for me, my goal is always to be the last real estate agent somebody hears from. And when you have that perspective and you're so people do business who they know, who they like, who they trust, and who they're in the flow with.
Yeah.
who they're in touch with. So that was a big one for me, was really getting in touch, staying in touch with people.
That's great. Yeah. So it sounds like, hard work, persistence, consistency, and having a game plan, sticking to that plan, knowing that it's going to pay off in time, is really what it sounds like you really put in place of, here's the model. I just need to stick to this model. And I know if I do, I'm going to get the results. So I really admire that, because sometimes it's easy to jump ship from plan to plan to plan if you don't see immediate results right away. But it's like, you got a game plan, you stuck to it, you stayed consistent, saw a lot of success. I'd love to, since you jumped into it, what's been the most fulfilling thing? Has this been something where you really have found, this is my sweet spot? You could say, you've really found fulfillment in this career and it was worth the change?
I have found fulfillment in this career, but again, people would say, well, is real estate your passion? No, it's the people. It truly is. So real estate's great, but I am in the relationship business.
Yeah.
And I just happen to be in real estate. So I could go be a garbage man somewhere. I can go sell cars. I can go do whatever. And as long as there's people there, I'll be all right, because it's my passion. Right. So yes, I have found satisfaction in my work, but it's not because I'm helping people buy and sell homes. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to ask you, just, for men who are looking for more fulfillment in their career, who are thinking about things, what advice would you give them? And I think that would be a piece, but is there anything to kind of add on to that, of what advice would you give to somebody who's looking for that extra level of fulfillment in their career?
I was part of a program called Strategic Coach. I don't know if you've heard of that, or people who are watching have heard of that. But Strategic Coach is a great coaching program for entrepreneurs specifically. But there's a lot of personal growth that comes there too. But the founder of that organization, his name's Dan Sullivan, and I think it would be really wise for people to check some of his stuff out on YouTube as well, or wherever. But one thing Dan Sullivan talks about that I really took to heart, and something I encourage other people to take to heart, is each of us is created with a unique ability, something that we do really well. There's something that Jonathan McGinley does that nobody else does it the same way. And it's really good, and it motivates him and it encourages him to do that. And I encourage people to really think very deeply about that question. What is it that I do that fulfills me, or that I feel I do really well? If I could wake up tomorrow and do anything I wanted, what would be most fulfilling for me? From a work perspective and even from personal perspective. And typically that answer will be helpful in identifying what it is that you really enjoy, what you're passionate about, and what you're good at. And when we as men get into the mindset of focusing on those things that we do really well, our unique ability, if you focus on that and try to delegate off everything else, and there's times we have to do the things we don't enjoy and aren't good at. We have to. But if you can primarily focus on what you're really good at and what you enjoy, then typically success and great satisfaction come with that. And so I think that's a real place for people to look at and identify where they want to go, and then follow that passion, and understanding it's not always an easy road to get there.
Right.
But the people, I'll ask that question a lot of times. Someone said, what I would love if I woke up and I could just photograph fish in the rivers. And I thought, okay, I would have to put some thought into that, of how you can turn that into a business or something, but maybe you can, right? Yeah. So don't put the blinders on. Ask yourself what you're passionate about. Open your world and look at it and go, is there something I can do to create that makes this very beneficial? I get to focus on my unique ability, and that typically can often bring financial success and personal satisfaction.
That's great. Yeah. Just starting with that question, starting with that vision, starting with the why. We've talked about that a lot today, and just what your unique ability is, what fills you up. And I do love that, just thinking outside the box of, if this is what I'm passionate about, are there possibilities, or how can I turn this into something? Or how can I apply this gift? How can I tap into this more in my current job, in my current situation? It doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur or have to start something. It's like, you could very much, like what you said, if you're a people person and you have a job that's not your own, you can very much invest in people within a corporation, within a business. And so you can very much find fulfillment that way too. So I do want to just say that you don't have to start your own thing to do everything that Jon just said. It was great that it applies across the board. So really good stuff, man. I really appreciate you. Yeah.
Let me just say super quick. The thing is, like what you said right there, is wherever you are, if you're finding yourself not focusing on what you do well, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. For me, it's relationship. So that's why if things start struggling with my work, I'm getting demotivated, I've got to shift back and go, no, but this is about the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, that's good.
I take more people to coffee. I engage with people more on a deeper level. And when you do those things and you do it well, the rest tends to fall into place in one way or the other. And so it's just important to remember that too.
I love that. That's so good. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jon. We'll wrap it up there. Is there any way that we as a community here on the Intentional Man podcast can support you and what you have going on right now?
Yeah, thanks. I have a real estate coaching online company that focuses on helping people transition from one career to real estate specifically, if that's what they want to do. So it's topnotchagents.com. And we help people do that, I think, in a really cool way. So that's, people can hit me up there and doesn't have to do anything with real estate. Your guests here are always welcome to reach out and we can talk life, right? Awesome. So always welcome to do that.
Awesome. Yep. Great. That's topnotchagents.com. Especially if you're interested in real estate, go check that out. Hit up Jon. He's a great resource for sure. So Jon, thanks so much for your time and your wisdom and everything shared with us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to the Intentional Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and leave a rating and review. If you are someone who is looking to take your life to the next level, accelerate your success, and live more intentionally, I would love to help. Shoot me a text at 970-430-6085, and we can schedule a time to meet to discuss your vision and your goals. Again, that is 970-430-6085. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, build a life that matters by living intentionally.